Hello everybody, we are going to be continuing on with our Champions Cup series today, talking about the 1926-27 NHL regular season and of course the playoffs. Now before we start, I wanted to say please make sure to subscribe to me if you're new to the channel, whatever the case may be. I'd love to have you here along the way as I try to do this as a career. Now let's get into it. And I actually have done this video multiple times, but the first time I had to stop and start over. Second time the video I got all the way done with and it didn't recorded part of the video. Anyway, let's talk about the 10th season in NHL history that saw the league expand for a third straight year, going from 7 teams to 10 teams, which was impressive considering that 3 seasons prior they just had 4 teams and played a 24-game schedule. This time around they had double digits, as they hit 10 teams and then they had a 44-game schedule. The 3 new clubs that were part of this double-digit league were all American, those teams being the Chicago Blackhawks, Detroit Cougars, and New York Rangers. As for fun facts about 2 clubs, I wanted to say the Detroit Cougars and Toronto, they need to be talked about for their names. The expansion club in Detroit was named the Cougars, as the franchise went on to become the Red Wings, but they ended up buying a lot of players from the former WCHL/WHL Victoria Cougars, so they ended up kind of adopting the name for just a little bit, and that is part of hockey history, as we all know. But I know a lot of people knew that they're called the Cougars, but they probably didn't know partially why they were adopting that name in the beginning of their franchise history. As for another team, the Toronto St. Patricks ran into a variety of issues on and off the ice and saw a power struggle up top, so they ended up changing their name mid-season to the iconic Maple Leafs, but they didn't don the blue until next season. They wore their green the rest of the way. And as for the schedule, they went from 36 games to 44 games this season. And I've kind of been going through the standings every year for these videos, and I didn't really want to bore you because of how many teams are getting added. So I'll put up the standings right here, and then we'll go through it. As you can see, the Canadian League and the Canadian Division and American Division exist as they separate the league into 2 divisions of 5 teams. They likely set this up A, because of travel, especially back then with passports, you got to worry about that stuff, but B, as well, you think about, some of the things like probably wanting an American team to be in the Stanley Cup. That is big. And of course, you have that Canadian-American rivalry that would be good for business, I'm assuming so. And there you go. There's only one way that there would be a All-American matchup here, as the New York Americans existed, played in the Canadian division. I guess that could have happened there, but that's interesting. As for the Canadian division, it was really interesting to look at, especially at the bottom, as problems seem to follow the St. Patrick's/Maple Leafs on the ice as they finished dead last in the Canadian division. As for the new American teams, the Rangers were on top of the American division, with the Chicago Blackhawks finishing middle of the pack and the Detroit Cougars finishing not only worst in their division, but worst in the league. The league's top scorer was Bill Cook with 33 goals and 4 assists for 37 points in 44 games played in his rookie year with the Rangers. As for the Hart Trophy, it was Herb Garnier of the Montreal Canadiens, as a defenseman reportedly played every minute of every game. Couldn't be me, I would be dead, but that is what supposedly Herb did. I'm not going to contest it, and if so, great for him. I imagine that's probably the case, especially back then. Think about toughness, blah, 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 all that stuff. As for the first time ever we saw the Vezina Trophy awarded in honor of George Vezina, who was unfortunately not able to continue on with his playing career because he passed away in 1926 from complications of tuberculosis. Actually collapsed, I think it was during the first game of the 1925-26 season, and then in 1926 did pass away, so that is unfortunate. The man that went on to win the first Vezina, though, was actually a fellow Montreal Canadiens goalie, that being George Hainsworth, and he only allowed 67 goals against in 44 games played with 14 shutouts. The award did at the time go to the goaltenders who allowed the fewest goals during the regular season. I will note, during the 1981-82 season, the award and its requirements did change a bit there. As for the NHL playoffs, it was adjusted because we know that the WCHL/WHL and the PCHA both folded. The WHL more recently. The PCHA had folded a while back ago. But yeah, so that meant that the NHL was the only league in North America that was going to compete for the Cup. This meant the 6 teams made the playoffs, with the top team in each division getting a bye into the semifinals, with the 2 and 3 seeds getting to play each other in a 2-game total goal series. So for the American division, with the Boston Bruins being the 2 seed and the Chicago Blackhawks being a 3 seed, went as follows. Game 1, Boston took a commanding 6-1 lead, and of course in Game 2, Chicago would really need to come out firing. They did, but Boston did as well. The game was tied 4-4, so Boston ended up going on to the semifinal thanks to 10-5 against Chicago. As for the Canadian division, the quarterfinals between the Montreal Canadiens and the Montreal Maroons, the Battle of Montreal, went like this. Game 1, a 1-1 tie, and then in Game 2, Montreal ended up winning in overtime 1-0. So the Habs go on to win 2-1, 2-1. They take down the defending Stanley Cup champions to go on to face the Ottawa Senators in the semifinal, as we saw the Sens taking on Montreal up in Canada, and the Boston Bruins square off against the New York Rangers in the States. So for the Montreal-Ottawa 2-game total goal series, Ottawa kicked it off with a 4-0 win in Game 1 to take a commanding 4-0 lead. And then in Game 2, Montreal needed to come out. The Canadiens needed to come out and fire and go off. They ended up tying the game 1-1. So Ottawa wins 5-1 to go on to another Stanley Cup. Montreal sent packing. And for the Boston-New York series, Game 1 ended tied 0-0. What an absolute barn burner. So, of course, winner takes all in Game 2. Boston wins 3-1, wins the series 3-1 too, as the Boston Bruins upset the Rangers, who were the 1 seed, and set the stage for the Stanley Cup final. And it was weird because basically it was supposed to be a 5-game series, and then things got weird because the overtime period, there was an overtime period, but if you didn't score a goal after the overtime, they basically would just have it to where the game was tied. So this is a weird series. Game 1 ended 0-0 in overtime, so that's a tie. Game 2, Ottawa wins 3-1, so they take a 1-0 series lead. Game 3 ends in a 1-0 or 1-1 tie in overtime. So there is 2 games left theoretically, but Boston has to win Game 4. Unfortunately for them, the Senators win 3-1, so they win another Stanley Cup, their first since the 1923-24 season, and their 4th in 8 years, and their 4th in a decade, as the Bruins faced heartbreak in their first Stanley Cup final appearance. And the Senators, of course, pride and joy of Canada, I guess you could say at this point, in a small market, continuing to succeed. But if you're interested or anything like that in other seasons, make sure to check out my playlist at the end of this video. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go off hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.